right, hey everybody, and welcome back to another deep dive. This time we're looking at a court case, and this one is going to really make you think about music and rights in a different way. So it comes from a 2020 court decision, and it features two big names in hip-hop, 50 Cent and Rick Ross. And basically the situation is that 50 Cent's mega hit, In Date Club.
Huge hit.
You know the one from back in 2003?
Oh, yeah. Everybody knows that one.
That song was sampled by Rick Ross on his mixtape, Renzel Remixes, and he released this mixtape for free online. Now, putting out these mixtapes with samples is...
pretty common.
Yeah, it's pretty standard in hip-hop.
Yeah, it's a way to kind of promote upcoming albums.
Right, like a little...
give people a taste.
Yeah, but here's where it gets interesting. 50 Cent, or Curtis Jackson, his real name, sued Rick Ross, whose real name is William Roberts, and he sued him not for copyright infringement, but for violation of his right of publicity.
And this is where the case gets very interesting. Because right of publicity is all about, protecting an individual's right to control how their name and image and likeness are used commercially.
So it's like, instead of 50 Cent saying, hey, you stole my music, he's saying, hey, you used my voice and my name to make money without my permission.
Exactly. And it gets really tricky here because then the court has to figure out, well, does copyright law kind of trump 50 Cent's right publicity claim?
So does 50 Cent even have a right to control how his voice and his name are used, even though he doesn't own the copyright to In Date Club?
Right. And so it really all boils down to this idea of preemption, which, we can get into.
Yeah, preemption. Help me understand this.
So you have two main types of preemption here that we're looking at. The first is implied preemption. And you can kind of think about that as, when a state law is trying to step on the toes of a federal law.
Yeah.
So in this case, if 50 Cent were to win his claim, would that mess with the rights of the person who actually owns the copyright?
Oh, so it's like...
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah, so it's like you can't, just because you performed on the track, then tell everybody else how to use that song.
Exactly.
Even if you don't own the copyright.
Yeah. You can imagine if anyone who performed on a track could dictate how that song is used. I mean, that would throw a wrench in the whole system of licensing music for movies and TV.
Yeah, that makes sense. So implied preemption is really about this balance of power between state and federal laws.
State and federal, exactly.
Okay, what about the other type of preemption?
So the other type is called statutory preemption. And that's a little bit more straightforward because that's actually written into the Copyright Act. And it basically says that if a state law is trying to grant rights that are basically the same as what's covered by copyright, then federal law wins. So in 50 Cent's case, the court had to decide if his right of publicity claim was basically just trying to create like a backdoor copyright claim.
So he's trying to
sneak it in?
Yeah, sneak in and get rights that are already covered.
Exactly.
By that big federal umbrella of copyright.
Yeah.
Okay, so to make things even more complicated, 50 Cent's contract with Shady Aftermath Records actually limited how In Date Club could be licensed.
Interesting.
So even the record label had to follow certain rules. So wait a minute. He doesn't own the copyright, but he has some control over the song.
It seems like it.
Just through this contract that he signed. Wild. So did that give him a stronger case then?
So that definitely adds another wrinkle to it.
Yeah.
Because then the court also had to consider, did this contract give 50 Cent any power to control In Date Club in a way that goes beyond what copyright law allows?
This is getting more and more interesting. All right, so how did the court untangle all of this?
Well, they ultimately sided with Rick Ross.
Really? I thought an artist's image was really...
Did you think?
Really protected. Why did they rule for Rick Ross?
So there's a few key reasons. Firstly, they found 50 Cent's right of publicity claimed to be pretty weak. It wasn't like Rick Ross was, putting 50 Cent's face on T-shirts or saying that 50 Cent endorsed the mixtape. It was really all about the song itself.
So he wasn't saying hey, 50 Cent is down with my mixtape.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the court also, pointed out that allowing 50 Cent to win could create a real problem for copyright holders because then any artist could potentially control how their work is used even if they don't own the copyright. And that could just throw the whole copyright system into chaos.
Yeah, that makes sense. So upholding copyright law
was a big factor.
Was a big factor in the court's decision.
Absolutely. And, crucially, there was nothing to suggest that anyone listening to that mixtape thought 50 Cent was endorsing Rick Ross's work. And it's important to remember that sampling without permission is actually pretty common in hip-hop, especially on mixtapes. It's often seen as a way to, pay homage and build on creativity. And a lot of artists are credited on mixtapes even without formal permission.
So this wasn't just about these two guys. It has implications for like the whole industry.
Exactly. This case has a lot bigger ramifications than just these two artists.
This is fascinating stuff. So we've unpacked this legal battle here, but what does it all mean for the future of music? We'll be right back to explore the wider impact of this decision on the music world and what it means for the future of sampling. Stay with us.
Okay, so we're back. My head is still spinning a little bit from all the ins and outs of this case. It's like not just about two rappers anymore. This could like really change the music industry.
Oh, absolutely. This decision has really big implications. The court basically said copyright law is king.
Right.
If publicity can't override that, especially when you think about a genre like hip-hop where sampling is like so ingrained.
Okay, so does that mean now anybody can just sample whatever they want?
Not quite. Copyright infringement is still, a real concern. This ruling doesn't mean you can just sample anything without permission. What it does say is that you can't use right of publicity to control how your work is sampled if you don't own the copyright.
So there's still a balance.
Right.
What does this mean for the future of music then? Well, that's the big question, isn't it? I mean, on the one hand, this decision could really open up a lot of possibilities for creative collaboration. Artists might feel more comfortable, building on existing work, knowing that they're not going to get hit with a right of publicity lawsuit on top of potential copyright issues.
So we could be seeing like more mashups, more interesting collaborations.
Absolutely. I think this ruling could lead to a more collaborative and innovative musical landscape overall. But on the other hand, some artists might be worried about losing control of their sound. What if someone samples their work in a way that they don't like? Or maybe they feel like they're not being properly compensated or recognized.
Yeah, it's like all these possibilities, but also these concerns about like artistic legacy and...
Right, it's a double-edged sword.
Okay, so this case really just brings up all these issues about law and art and technology.
Okay. It really forces us to ask, how do we protect artists' rights at the same time as we're protecting creative expression? Especially in a digital age where music is constantly being remixed and sampled and shared.
That's a really good question, and I think more relevant than ever. So what are some things that we can do to address these challenges moving forward?
Well, one important step is to create clearer legal frameworks around sampling. We might see more specific guidelines or even legislation that deals with the unique challenges of sampling, especially in a genre like hip-hop.
So almost like a set of rules of the game for sampling.
Exactly.
Could this lead to like a shift in how artists approach sampling in the first place?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. We might see a lot more upfront agreements and licensing deals between artists. Collaborative sampling where artists are working together from the beginning to create something new. And I think there could be a much greater emphasis on recognizing and crediting the original artists whose work is being sampled.
So more transparency, more collaboration, more respect all around.
Exactly. A win-win for everyone involved.
Yeah.
This whole situation could also really push the music industry to develop new technologies that make it easier to clear samples legally.
So like instead of lawsuits and legal battles, you have like a system that's streamlined.
Exactly.
Oh.
Imagine being able to clear a sample in minutes online without having to go through all this complicated legal stuff.
That sounds amazing. Is that even possible?
It might sound idealistic, but I don't think it's out of reach. It would just take a collective effort from artists and record labels and legal experts and tech innovators.
A lot of people coming to the table.
Yeah.
So what's the main thing you want our listeners to take away from all of this?
I think the biggest takeaway is that the law is constantly evolving. It's trying to keep up with technology and artistic expression. And as music continues to push the boundaries, it's really important to keep having these conversations and asking these tough questions so that we can create a future where creativity can thrive while also respecting the rights of creators.
Absolutely. This deep dive has been so eye-opening for me. It really shows how complicated things are when you start talking about music and copyright and the right of publicity. And it makes you realize that even something as simple as a song sample can lead to these huge legal battles and these really big questions about what it means to create art in a digital age. So the next time you hear a cool sample in a song, think about everything that went into it, all the influences, all the legal battles, all the creative forces at play. It's really fascinating stuff.
Man, it's crazy to think that one court case can spark all these conversations. We've talked about so much today, from the specifics of 50 Cent and Rick Ross to the big picture of where the music industry is going. But I guess I'm still wondering, where do we go from here? How do we balance creative freedom with protecting artists?
That is the question, isn't it? And I think, this whole case just highlights how we need to think about this in a more like nuanced way. It's not just black and white, you know? Like all sampling is okay or all sampling is bad.
Yeah, one size fits all doesn't really work, right? Especially when you think about how different genres have different traditions when it comes to sampling. Like in hip hop, sampling has been a core part of the genre for like decades. It's a way to pay homage to the people who came before you.
Like a musical conversation almost?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And this case was about hip hop. But it could have implications for other genres too.
Yeah.
It makes you think about how to create a system where this kind of creative back and forth can happen, but also make sure that artists are getting paid and getting recognized.
Yeah, it's tough,
That's a tough balance.
What are some things that we could actually do to get closer to that balance?
Well, one idea that's been floating around is this concept of micro-licensing. So imagine a system where you could clear samples online super easily. Maybe you pay a small fee, but you wouldn't have to go through all that complicated legal stuff.
So that would help out a lot of artists who are just starting out.
Yeah, exactly. It would make sampling more accessible for everyone. And for the artists who are getting sampled, it could be a new way to make money and to track how their music is being used.
Yeah, everybody wins.
Exactly.
Are there any other things happening that you think are promising?
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff being developed with AI. Imagine software that could listen to a track and instantly tell you if there are any samples, and maybe even suggest licensing options.
Wow, so it would take the guesswork out of it.
Exactly.
But then that also brings up new questions about like who owns what and how much control do humans still have when AI is making music?
You hit the nail on the head. Every solution creates new challenges.
But it's still exciting to see what's possible.
It is.
So as we're wrapping up here, what's the one thing you really want people to think about after listening to this whole conversation?
Well, I think the most important thing to remember is that this conversation about sampling isn't over. It's just beginning. This court case was just one piece of a much bigger puzzle. As technology keeps changing and music keeps evolving, we need to be open to new ideas and new ways of thinking about creativity and ownership and collaboration.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. This deep dive has been quite a journey. We went from the courtroom to the music studio, and we ended up with way more questions than answers.
Yeah.
But that's what makes this stuff so interesting. There's always more to learn. So the next time you hear a sample in a song that you like, take a minute to think about everything behind it, all the people, the stories, the legal battles. It's a whole world out there. All right, that's it for this deep dive. Until next time, keep on listening, keep on learning, and we'll catch you later.